Testing 1, 2, 3. I don't know if this is live yet, but good morning. We will begin at 10:30, and I'm just making sure our first Zoom to live stream is working. We'll be back shortly at 10:30. We'll begin. Just letting folks know that are on. We are about to begin at 10:30, and this is our first Zoom to live stream on a Sunday morning, and we'll start in a couple minutes. Good morning to all of you out there who are part of First Unitarian Church of Portland. We are online only this morning. This is our first Zoom to live stream on Sunday morning. If you're new, let me introduce myself. My name is Alison Miller, and it is my privilege to serve this vibrant community as the senior minister. First Unitarian is a village of people of all ages who are growing in spirit and growing our collective power to build the beloved community. Yes, we welcome newcomers and longtime members and friends. And I'm so glad that you're here for what is a bit of a different morning around here. It has been a very challenging week of weather events here in Portland for some who may not live in the area. So today we have planned for a simplified but meaningful morning online. We're broadcasting right now from Zoom. I'm broadcasting to you from home and to our live stream for the first time. I'll be sharing a message with you shortly, and then you are invited to join me and others in our community for a social hour at 11 a.m. We have two links that were sent out in email, one for our children and youth to join with Cassandra Sheffman, our Director of Religious Education, for a story and conversation. And at that same link, there will also be a breakout room for a middle and high school youth group gathering. And the other link is for everyone else to join for connection and reflection. And I will be joining you there. And Dana Buell, our social justice director, will also be there. And she will actually ground us with an opening prayer for that time. And that will begin again at 11, both the children's and youth social hour and the social hour for everyone else. Just a few short announcements. The board forum for today has been canceled and it will be rescheduled soon. The Tri-County Community Assembly called Who Gets to Thrive in Oregon that we are hosting and will be led by the Levin Land and Housing Coalition at 4 p.m. today is both on and we are hoping and expecting in person. So 4 o'clock today at First Unitarian, and all are welcome. Today is the first Sunday of Lent, and I remind you of the opportunity to attend the Monday morning 30-minute Matin services at 8:30 a.m. on Zoom with our spiritual directors. And you can also subscribe to our music ministry's Lenten listening devotional by texting UU Lent to 888-574-3607. Next Sunday, we will be back to our usual online and in-person full worship service, weather permitting, but it has been, I think, a 1-in-100-year storm here in Portland this week. While weather may have separated us physically this morning, I am so glad we are together. Welcome. And if you'd like to give to this morning's collection at any time, you can go to our the link in our e-news to be able to give to that collection. If you have a chalice or a candle at home, I invite you to consider lighting it with us this morning. David and Asher, my family, will be lighting ours here.
We are Unitarian Universalist.
We light our chalice in faith, in hope, and in love. Thank you. Our reading this morning is called The Parable of the Trapeze by Danon Perry. Sometimes I feel that my life is a series of trapeze swings. I'm either hanging on to a trapeze bar swinging along, or for a few moments in my life, I'm hurtling across space in between trapeze bars. Most of the time, I spend my life hanging on for dear life to my trapeze bar of the moment. It carries me along at a certain steady rate of swing, and I have the feeling that I'm in control of my life. I know most of the right questions and even some of the answers. But every once in a while, as I'm merrily swinging along, I look out ahead of me into the distance. And what do I see? I see another trapeze bar swinging towards me. It's empty, and I know that this trapeze bar has my name on it. It is my next step, my growth, my aliveness coming to get me. In my heart of hearts, I know that for me to grow, I must release my grip on this present, well-known bar and move to the new one. Each time it happens to me, I hope that I won't have to let go of my old bar completely before I grab that new one. But I know that I must totally release my grasp on my old bar and hurtle across space before I can grab onto the new bar. Each time, I am filled with terror. It doesn't matter that in all my previous hurdles across the void of unknowing, I have always made it. Each time, I am afraid that I will miss, that I will be crushed on unseen rocks in the bottomless chasm between bars. I do it anyway. Perhaps this is the essence of what the mystics call the faith experience. No guarantees, no net, no insurance policy, but you do it anyway because to keep hanging on to that old bar is no longer an alternative. It's called transition. I have come to believe that this transition is the only place that real change occurs. I mean, real change. not the pseudo change that only lasts until the next time my old buttons get punched. I have noticed in our culture, this transition zone is looked upon as a no thing, a no place between places. Sure, the old trapeze bar was real, and the new one coming towards me, I hope that's real too. But the void in between, is that just a scary, confusing, disorienting nowhere that must be gotten through as fast and as unconsciously as possible? No, what a wasted opportunity that would be. I have a sneaking suspicion that the transition zone is real and the bars are illusions we dream up to avoid the void where the real change, the real growth occurs for us. Whether or not my hunch is true, it remains that the transition zones in our lives are incredibly rich places. They should be honored, even savored. Yes, with all the pain and fear and feelings of being out of control that can accompany transitions, they are still the most alive, most growth-filled, passionate, expansive moments in our lives. So transformation of fear may have nothing to do with making fear go away, but rather with giving ourselves permission to hang out in the transition between trapezes, transforming our need to grab that new bar. Any bar is allowing ourselves to dwell in the only place where real change happens. It can be terrifying. It can also be enlightening in the true sense of the word. Hurtling through the void, we just may learn how to fly. Thank you to Denon Perry for those beautiful, powerful, moving words. We are at the beginning of the Lenten season, an invitation to open our minds and hearts and spirits to the possibility of transformation. The three pillar practices of prayer, fasting, and charity are the vehicles that move us along that journey of change. Fasting is about letting go of what no longer serves our spiritual health or the wholeness of the beloved community that we seek. It is about creating space in our lives for what matters most. Prayer and charity are about proactively filling that space with intentions and actions that lead to individual healing and collective well-being. The season began with Ash Wednesday earlier this week, and some of you may have memories of receiving ashes mixed with holy water, placed on your forehead by a priest or minister or deacon who shared these words: "Remember, you are dust, and to dust you shall return." Genesis 3:19. Or you may have the experience with Unitarian and Universalist Lenten meditation manuals that were published pre-merger, or the renewal of this practice in our congregation and online. If you enter #UULent on social media, you will find a number of offerings beyond our congregation alone. All these practices lead us on a journey of listening deeply to the words of the teacher and prophet Jesus, reflecting on the rippling actions of his ministry, which continue to ripple out to this very day. And on the Lenten journey, we come to terms with the story of the end of his life on Good Friday. This is a moment of turning, of letting go, of grief, as we hurtle towards the next trapeze bar moving towards us. It's an invitation to grab on for your life, as well as to experience that space in the middle. For your life is not over, and love's ministry was never meant for one man alone to fulfill. The words and practices throughout Lent remind us that life is fleeting, that each of us is mortal, and that what we can count on is this precious moment, the one in which we are never quite the same as we were in the moment before it. Let me share a story from a mentor of mine from another faith tradition about an episode from the beginning of his ministry. Gavin was a new pastor. He received a call to come to the bedside of one of the elders in his congregation, a pillar of that church. Martha was on her deathbed, and she wanted him to come for a visit. Now, he had a fair number of commitments that day, but of course, he shifted everything around and went straight to her. When he arrived, Martha seemed to be asleep. Now, Gavin didn't want to disturb her rest, so he waited quietly and patiently by her bedside, but couldn't stop thinking about all that remained to do on his to-do list. After a while, he looked at his watch to see how much time had passed. At that very moment, Martha opened her eyes and quipped, "Do you have somewhere more important to be?" Flustered and jolted to a new level of wakefulness, he said, "No, you're right. I am here." He took a deep breath and sat with her. This woman who he had begun to love, this woman who meant so much to the people he served. He turned his heart towards prayer and his full body towards presence. Those were Martha's last words, and they shaped the minister he became and the quality of his presence. Here we are, you and I, in this community of people who practice what it looks like to extend care and compassion and to muster courage in this village we have chosen to cast our spiritual lot with. Here we are, who show up for one another and for the world during both good times and hard times, and who show up for our families and friends in the event when we do draw our last breath, to testify to the ways our love ripples out beyond death. We arrive at Lent this year on the very week of the third anniversary of the first patient in Oregon to be diagnosed with coronavirus, and on the very week of the anniversary of the unfolding war in Ukraine. It also happens to be the very day and anniversary that young Trayvon Martin was murdered while out buying a pack of Skittles while wearing a hoodie. Sometimes the lessons of Lent and letting go is not about acceptance. Sometimes letting go is about ceasing the habits, the practices, and the actions that lead to more death. Countering science with ignorance, promulgating war, and perpetuating racism are three obstacles to individual health and collective well-being. Other times, letting go is about acceptance. That's not lost on me as I'm zooming from home to you right now. This week, as Portland experienced the second largest snowfall on record, we are relearning the lessons that sometimes transformation is about surrendering to what is happening that is out of our control. We are neither or all-powerful, nor are we powerless. We co-create with what comes our way. The hoped for and highly anticipated trapeze bar moving towards us, the one we wish we could just push back that is coming towards us anyway, and the ones we're not sure how to feel about. Susan Frederick Gray, our UUA president, shared that reading that story by Danon Perry at the senior ministers of large UU congregations at our retreat last week in California as an important message, as so many of our churches are in transition at this time because of ministers retiring and the ensuing generational shifts, because a number of colleagues and divinity students have decided to leave parish ministry in this pandemic. And because the religious landscape and the human landscape has shifted in ways that we don't fully understand yet. I believe that she also shared it with you when she spoke here at Reverend Bill Sinkford's last celebratory day. I am deeply conscious of the precious time that we are in. You and I, our congregation, and even our city and country and the world. As Danon Perry writes, we are hurtling through space and learning how to fly in this time of both having emerged and continuing to emerge from the pandemic, and in this time of a new shared ministry. The other day, I met with the volunteers on the installation committee about our upcoming service on April 16th at 4 p.m. And we spoke about the difference between an ordination service and an installation service. An ordination is a beautiful ceremony about an individual's call to the ministry. There is traditionally a charge to the minister only. At an installation service, it is about our shared calling to covenantal ministry together. You and I covenant, and we will both receive charges, one to the minister and one to the congregation. I am deeply conscious of this liminal time, of this expanding time, of this precious reflective time. And I want you to know that it is with reverence and awe that I am receiving the stories that you share with me about this, our historic church, and how it has been transformed by shared callings since 1865. Where the laity and the ministry and the staff have been stewards of the mantle of love's ministry in our sanctuary, on the streets of Portland, and in our wider faith movement. I'm the 11th called senior minister here, and amongst us are many generations. You who arrived on our doorstep or our virtual sanctuary for the first time, some as early as Reverend Steiner's tenure, or Reverend Alan Deal's, or Reverend Marilyn Sewell's, or Reverend Bill Sinkford's, or quite recently within the last 6 months during the beginning of my tenure. Let us seize then the fullness of this time of letting go and of holding on to what matters most. Let us begin to move through the steps of transitions in ministry as an invitation to us this Lenten season through the next one. If we listen deeply to one another, we will be able to begin to name what Danon Perry calls the trapeze bar that is moving towards us. He writes, "It is my next step, my growth, my aliveness coming to get me. In my heart of hearts, I know that for me to grow, I must release my grip on this present well-known bar and move to the new one. Here are 5 steps that ministers are given for these seasons of transition. Whether they are settled ministers or interim ones, contract or developmental, hired, senior, associate, or assistant, we are all given these to share with our congregations. And I share them now with you as spiritual tools to help us make the most of this time in between and to help us move forward with grace and grit when we falter, which we shall. This is a journey into the unknown, and we are adapting and changing as we go. The first step, coming to terms with history. We have arrived here at First Unitarian at many different times in history. There is a need to share our heritage, the history and the stories that have shaped us into who we are today. And I want to hear all those stories, wrapping the block with a ribbon and all the stories that came before and have come since. Part of this first step is also about processing grief. Lent is a holiday connected to grief. Both grief about what was challenging and is unresolved in our past, in our history, and maybe grief about what worked so well at another time in another era that no longer works today. And part of it is about the grief that comes with celebrating an ending. It's not that long ago that you said goodbye to Reverend Bill Singford in June. Goodbyes take time, and that's important. Some of you may even still carry some grief from another minister or staff member or lay leader. Moving through that season is important, and I honor that truth. Step 2 in transitions in ministry. Discovering a new or renewed identity. Who are we now in our present context? Who are we feeling called to become, to be in relationship with? How are we called to serve in 2023 and beyond? Both these first 2 steps will no doubt be part of our community conversations happening this spring. Step 3. Allowing leadership to emerge. How can we empower new people to lead? The ones that don't know how we do things. How can we be open to new styles of leadership and avoid saying things like, well, we tried that 30 years ago and it didn't work, or I don't think we can do that here. Really opening us up. How can longtime leaders both mentor others, such a precious gift, and be mentored in new ways by newcomers? The power of a multi-generational community is we know we learn from one another. 4, renewing denominational ties. What is our larger Unitarian Universalist heritage? Who are our partners in faith? What are the resources and learning that we could glean from the wisdom of others? 5, committing to new directions in ministry, developing a shared vision for our future, opening our hearts, minds, and spirits to the learning and the change, being ready to ask, how can I be of service? How can we organize our collective gifts to be stewards of the mantle of love's ministry in our time? Each of us is called in our faith to be priests and prophets, to model care and compassion and courage in how we love in this spiritual village that we have freely chosen, and in the beloved community beyond any walls that we might create. Lent reminds us that ultimately, today, is the day that we are given to sow gladness, to sow justice, to sow forgiveness, to sow faithfulness, to sow the seeds of more abundant life for the tomorrows we will greet and the tomorrows that others will greet without us. May we feel the presence of the shade of our ancestors' trees, and may we, for the moment, fly forth from their branches. I will close with a Lenten reflection and prayer. Spirit of life, teach me that I am mortal, so that I may not squander this day. Teach me that I am interdependent, so that I may ask for help when I need it. Teach me that I am made for love, so that I may show up when others are in need. Teach me that I am made for hope, so that I may reach for what once seemed impossible. Teach me that I am made for now, so that I may give away all that I am and never hold back. May it be so. Blessed be one and all of you, and amen. And now I invite you to join me and others in one of those two Zoom rooms for our community time. One, Dana Buell and I will be in, and the other, Cassandra Sheffman and Nicole Bomer with our children and youth. So hope to see a number of you soon. And of course, to see you next week. Take care.